Welcome to this new episode brought to you by Volta 15, your #1 top 15 list maker. In today's countdown, we'll look at the bizarre and unexpected lives of notorious figures after they left prison. From mob bosses who faded into obscurity to celebrities who reinvented themselves in surreal ways. These stories prove that life after prison can be stranger than fiction. Let's begin. Number 15. Al Capone. Released from custody in 1939 after years of failing health, Al Capone retreated to his Palm Island estate in Florida. The one-time king of Chicago's underworld was a shadow of himself due to late-stage syphilis that impaired his memory and judgment. The man who once commanded bootleg empires now spent his days fishing in the shallows, playing cards with staff, and shuffling the grounds in a bathrobe. Visitors describe moments of lucidity punctured by confusion, as if he were flickering between past power and present fragility. He doted on family, listened to big band records, and retold stories he no longer fully grasped. Capone died in 1947 at age 48, leaving behind a legend of violence and wealth that stood in stark contrast to his quiet, diminished end. His post-prison life was not a comeback or a reckoning. It was a slow fade, lived in warm sunshine and fading memory. Number 14. Mike Tyson. After serving a sentence in the 1990s, Mike Tyson shocked audiences with an unconventional reinvention. He returned to the ring, but the more surprising pivot came later. Tyson leaned into self-parody and confession, telling his story on stage and screen. He performed a Broadway one-man show, appeared in blockbuster comedies, and fronted an animated series that turned his public image inside out. He launched a podcast and cannabis ventures and spoke openly about addiction, grief, and ego. The once fearsome heavyweight built a second act that mixed vulnerability with spectacle. For a man whose life had been defined by chaos, the bizarre part wasn't the punches. It was the way a cultural villain learned to joke about himself, cash in on his myth, and find a measure of peace by narrating his own contradictions. Number 13. John Gotti Jr. John Gotti Jr., son of the Teflon Don, served time for racketeering. Afterward, he tried to step out of the shadows that made him famous. He gave interviews, collaborated on a memoir, and insisted that he left organized crime behind. He positioned himself as a man who learned hard lessons about loyalty, ego, and the cost of the spotlight. Critics doubted him, pointing to old ties and the gravity of the family name. Supporters argued that people can change and that walking away is itself a kind of courage. Gotti Jr.'s post-prison life is a balancing act between reinvention and reputation. He courts the public just enough to control the story, while keeping distance from the world that shaped him. It is a strange limbo for a former mob prince, living with a surname that will always draw cameras, curiosity, and suspicion. Number 12. Frank Abagnale. Frank Abagnale's pre-prison life was a whirlwind of impostures. After serving time, he built a career helping companies and agencies understand exactly how people like him exploit trust. He founded a security consultancy, lectured on check fraud and identity theft, and worked with banks and law enforcement on prevention. The irony is part of the draw. The former forger became a teacher of caution, an evangelist for verification, and a fixture on corporate stages. Skeptics have challenged parts of his story, but the broader arc is undeniable. A young con man grew into an older expert on the very tricks he once used. Abagnale's post-prison life is built around the thesis that knowledge of deception can be turned toward defense. The result is one of the oddest career pivots in crime lore. From counterfeit to consultant, from pretending to be a pilot to advising those who fly the money. Number 11. Shine, Jamal Barrow. The Belizean American rapper Shine served nearly a decade for his role in a New York nightclub shooting. Deported after release, he returned to Belize with a new mission. He reconnected with his roots, rebranded his public image, and entered politics. He won a seat in Belize's House of Representatives and later rose to national prominence, championing economic opportunity, youth programs, and justice reform. The transformation is startling. A former hip-hop star with a notorious case rebuilt himself into a statesman who dresses in tailored suits and speaks in measured tones about policy. He still performs on occasion, but the center of gravity shifted from the stage to Parliament. Shine's post-prison life is a case study in radical reinvention. It shows how fame, failure, and discipline can converge to create a public figure whose past will always trail him, even as he argues for a future beyond it. Number 10. Piper Kerman. Piper Kerman served a federal sentence for a drug offense, then wrote a candid memoir about the women she met and the system she saw. That book inspired a hit series that millions binged, opening mainstream conversations about incarceration, dignity, and reform. Kerman used her platform to advocate for better conditions, sentencing sanity, and reentry support. She lectured at campuses and civic forums and worked with nonprofits. Her post-prison life is not sensational in the tabloid sense. It is the quieter, durable kind of bizarre, where a personal crisis becomes global entertainment and then a springboard for policy talk. The irony is constant. A low-profile federal case turned into one of streaming's defining shows, and a first-time author became a voice for people whose stories are rarely heard. Kerman's second act is proof that storytelling can move culture, even when it begins in a place designed to silence. Number 9. Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart served time related to a financial case, then executed a precision comeback. She embraced the narrative rather than hiding from it. She relaunched products, expanded media ventures, and surprised audiences with playful collaborations, including a hit cooking show with a legendary rapper. The pairing worked because Stewart leaned into contrast and camp, winking at the public while doubling down on expertise. She posed on magazine covers, refreshed her brand for a new generation, and became a meme while remaining a meticulous business operator. The bizarre element is the mashup of worlds. A doyen of meticulous living used post-prison notoriety to become pop culture cool, reminding everyone that reinvention can be both strategic and fun. Her second act is a master class in controlling the frame, turning a fall from grace into a durable, diversified return to the top. Number 8. Jordan Belfort. Jordan Belfort went to prison for securities fraud. After release, he pivoted to stages and screens as a motivational speaker and sales trainer. He sells lessons drawn from excess, collapse, and accountability, promising audiences a sharper instinct for risk and persuasion. His memoir became a film that cemented his image as the grinning avatar of greed. Critics question his payment of restitution and the glamorization of his past. Supporters say he's honest about failure and skilled at teaching communication. Belfort's post-prison life is a paradox. He profits from the myth he created while trying to persuade the world that the old impulses are under control. Seminars, podcasts, and splashy interviews keep the brand alive. Whether you view it as rehabilitation or repackaging, the transformation is undeniably marketable, making him one of the most visible white-collar ex-cons on earth. Number 7. Danny Trejo. Danny Trejo spent much of his youth in and out of institutions. After a final sentence, he committed to sobriety and mentoring, then tumbled into acting through a chance-set visit. His weathered face and quiet intensity made him unforgettable. He worked constantly, eventually headlining movies and building beloved taco and donut chains in Los Angeles. Trejo's post-prison life is rooted in service as much as stardom. He volunteers, speaks at recovery meetings, and hires people who need second chances. The bizarre part is how effortless it looks in retrospect. A man whose life once seemed destined for tragedy became a cultural comfort, a symbol that hard edges can soften without disappearing. The tattoos stayed. The menace turned into charisma. And the message he repeats is simple. It is never too late to rewrite your story, one day at a time. Number 6. Christian Brando. Christian Brando, son of the legendary actor, served time for manslaughter in the 1990s. Freedom did not bring clarity. He struggled with substance abuse and legal and romantic turmoil. He worked sporadically, tried to keep a low profile, and carried the weight of a famous name that brought more scrutiny than opportunity. His few interviews hinted at pain and resentment, a life shaped by chaos long before prison and haunted by it afterward. Brando died in 2008 at 49. His post-prison years are not a redemptive arc or a polished comeback. They are a somber reminder that release is not the same as recovery. Without structure or purpose, notoriety curdles. The cameras move on. The person is left with habits and ghosts. In that sense, his second act is one of the saddest on this list, a cautionary tale about fame, trauma, and the limits of escape. Number 5. John Hinckley Jr. John Hinckley Jr., who attempted to assassinate a U.S. president, was eventually released under strict conditions and later unconditionally. He now writes songs, posts performances online, and books small venues when permitted. The contrast is surreal. A man once synonymous with political violence now strums gentle tunes and thanks fans for listening. Hinckley speaks about mental health and the boundaries that govern his freedom. His audiences are a mix of curiosity seekers and people genuinely moved by his music. The spectacle raises uncomfortable questions about fame, forgiveness, and the ethics of platforms. Is this rehabilitation or voyeurism? Hinckley's post-prison life is deliberately ordinary, built around routines, guitars, and watchful authorities. It is bizarre because the past never quite recedes. Every chord carries history. Every show is shadowed by the reason anyone knows his name at all. Number 4. O.J. Simpson. After serving time for a Nevada robbery case, O.J. Simpson settled into a Las Vegas routine of golf, photos with curious fans, and occasional public appearances. He later embraced social media, posting casual videos that fueled debates about tone, remorse, and spectacle. The feed became a window into a life that courted attention while pretending it was no big deal. Simpson's post-prison years ended with his death in 2024, but the period stands as an example of how notoriety and the internet feed each other. He lived like a man who knew the spotlight would never leave, even when he did little to hold it. The surreal part was the normality. Tea times, birthday dinners, and short clips online can look like any retiree's life, until you remember the history that made them news. We are now moving on to the top 3 of the list. If you have made it this far, please do not forget to like this video and subscribe to Vault of 15. Number 3. Abby Lee Miller. Abby Lee Miller, famous for a dance show and infamous for a fraud conviction, served time and then faced a life-threatening cancer that left her using a wheelchair. She returned to television and social media with unfiltered candor about pain, ambition, and the industry that made her. Her post-prison life is a tug-of-war between empathy and outrage. She highlights accessibility issues and the grit of recovery while leaning into the brash persona that built her brand. The bizarre twist is how seamlessly reality television absorbs real suffering. The narrative became a comeback story in the most literal sense, where every therapy session and studio visit could also be content. Whether you cheer or cringe, the reinvention is undeniable. She rebuilt a platform from the rubble of scandal and illness, and she uses it daily. Number 2, Joey Buttafuoco. Joey Buttafuoco served time linked to a scandal that defined early 1990s tabloid culture. After release, he opened and closed auto shops, flirted with reality TV, and popped up in celebrity boxing, documentary interviews, and odd media side quests. He seems to exist wherever nostalgia for sensational headlines lives. His post-prison life is a carousel of notoriety maintenance. He gives quotable lines, reenacts old moments, and keeps the brand alive just enough to be booked again. It is bizarre precisely because it feels so performative. The original tragedy becomes a franchise, and the man at its center plays himself in endless reruns. For some, that is cynical. For others, it is simply how modern fame works. Either way, Joey remains a reminder that infamy can be a career. Number 1. Tim Allen. Tim Allen served time on a serious drug case long before he became a household name. After release, he hustled on the comedy circuit, found his voice, and landed a network sitcom that crowned him the everyman of 1990s television. Film roles followed, including voicing a beloved animated hero and starring in family hits. The transformation is almost archetypal. A young man makes catastrophic choices, confronts the consequences, and then builds a disciplined, wildly successful life in public. Allen rarely romanticizes his past. He presents it as a warning, a pivot point, and occasionally as material for a joke delivered with a wink. His post-prison story endures because it is both familiar and rare. Plenty of people promise to change. Very few change so visibly that an entire culture watches them do it. We hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more top 15 lists of shocking history, bizarre true stories, and the world's strangest lives. Until next time, and remember, truth is in the list.